Our parsha says, Vayikru Yemei Yisrael lamut, Vayikra livno liYosef. And the days of Israel's life drew close to his dying, and he called his son Joseph. The Haftarah begins, Vayikruvu Yemei David lamut, Vayitzav et Shlomo beno. And the days of David, of David, not David HaMelech, but David, grew close to his death, and he commanded his son Shlomo to come to him. Each of us comes to a point where we suddenly see our mortality. It might make us more serious, but it's also a time that inspires people to live their lives to the fullest. It might be inspired by something big. COVID did this for a lot of people, October 7th also, but it may be approaching a significant birthday for yourself or maybe for someone else in your family. It may be a life cycle event, the birth of a grandchild perhaps, that you suddenly see what's happening and realize that time is passing. And like Jacob and like David in our Parsha and our Haftarah this week, it often comes with a desire to share insights, lessons, to make sure that the people around us, those we love, understand what was important to us. Death is something that all too often we don't want to speak about. When I was a child, it was whispered. If someone was sick, we whispered it. If someone was dying, it was whispered. But Judaism talks about it a lot. Deaths are marked in our readings, not just the big ones, like Jacob or like David, but Devorah, Rivka's nurse. Her death is marked. We know almost nothing else, but her death is important. And that's because this is something we need to speak about. It's not to create worry. It's not to create anxiety. It's a normal part of life. In 2012, again in 2019, and then 6 days ago, Forbes published an article, more articles, of the biggest regrets in life. This last one, 6 days ago, came with an added theme, is it too late to leave a legacy? And I thought, how appropriate, since Jacob was passing on his legacy this week. As a business magazine, you might expect that it would have something to do with writing your will and worrying about financial futures, inheritance. This isn't mentioned even once in the article. Instead, it speaks to an idea that's trademarked by the author, Jan Fried, called breadcrumb legacy. The idea that our legacy is not passed on in large chunks, but it's the breadcrumbs that we leave behind us. Made me think of Hansel and Gretel, the breadcrumbs that led them home, the breadcrumbs we leave. Let people follow a path to who we were, who we are now, who we were. It's an opportunity to share what we want out of life, what's important to us, what we want our children, our grandchildren, our friends, and everyone else to remember. Jacob and David are very lucky. They're given insight into their deaths approaching. They have time to call their children to them and speak to them. And the children also have time to respond. We know Jacob's children were fine, and he needn't have worried because his children, when they see him and he wants to talk to them, they respond, Shema Yisrael. Adonai Eloheinu Adonai Echad. Of all the things Jacob wanted to pass on, the legacy of being God's people and of having one God in a world where that was not the common thing, was so important. And they were able to say, don't worry, Dad, we got this. It wasn't just that it was taught, it was caught. We internalized it. Financial legacy is a nice thing. It's great to be able to provide. But the best legacy is one that's shared during the daytime, the time you are alive, evenings, watching movies, or sitting around, in this weather, a fire, or summer campfires. It's vacations spent together. It's the little stories that are told over and over and over. Lessons that are repeated again and again. There are those moments when you can look back and say, I know they caught it. I didn't just teach it. Because we talk about it often. And you see the values, you see the legacy, not just one way from you being projected to your children, your grandchildren, but you see it projected back at you in the nachas you share and in the moments of watching them grow and then pass on those legacies to their children, to their friends, to their extended family. In that moment, then we know there is happiness, contentedness, and peace. And then we don't have to have regrets when we move on. I hope that as we build our community, we have legacies that are not just from parents to children and grandparents to children and grandchildren, but rather to each other. Things you will teach me, things I will teach you, and the wonderful legacy that I believe Beth Torah has already provided in our community and will continue to provide. Shabbat Shalom.